So next we have a substitution because the scheduled speaker, Jeff Anderson, got caught on the plane. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Hartney. Mark is the Director of Strategic Planning at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and he's also a board member of CalCharge. So he's here today to talk about CalCharge, an organization with which both Primus and Involved are members of. Mark.
Great, thanks, Greg. So I am pinch hitting, so I'll try and do my best here, but I've had the opportunity to work with CalCharge for about a year now, and work closely with Jeff as well as Venkat Srinivasan from Berkeley Labs, who I think you both have presented here in the past. So I want to give you a little bit of an update on CalCharge, where we're at, and some of the progress that's been made in that. So let me jump into that. And you know, Craig actually teed this up pretty well in his remarks in talking about sort of the history and the legacy of energy innovation, storage companies would be the large, small, the user community, and the state impetus behind storage here. But let me give you a little more of the facts and figures there, and try and present at least a whole state view as well. You know, we have found, and this number grows and continues to grow every month, and up to 128 energy storage companies in California now. I think a year ago when we presented this data, it was probably 75, and recently there was a trip down to Southern California, and we met with a bunch of new startup companies that have just started there. So it continues to grow, and I think that's a testament to the history and legacy that Craig talked about, but also the excitement around the opportunity that exists today. A couple of facts and figures. You know, if you look at the energy investment, or the investment into storage as a whole, almost a third of that is taking place in California. If you look at patent filings as another indicator, a predominant amount of that comes from California-based companies. And if you look at clean technology writ large, storage is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of that pie. So, you know, going from generation requirements initially now towards more some of the system things that are required from a utilization point of view. So I think really the bottom line is California's got a huge opportunity, a huge amount of resources, and what CalCharge is really trying to do is to knit a lot of those together. You know, again, Craig, I think kind of teed this up well, that it really starts with some of the history and legacy around academic institutions and research labs as people who were the first to identify some of the technologies, the innovations, and things that have enabled this to take place here. And so SLAC and Berkeley are two DOE national labs. Both partnered very closely with leading research institutions that educate students and perform research as well. San Jose State is an important part of CalCharge, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But couple that with sort of the venture capital community and the entrepreneurial spirit that you find out here, and that leads people to spin companies out from some of the innovative technology that's been developed in the labs. And so there's some examples of that we'll build here. Two companies, Primus and Interval. Well, they weren't technology specifically developed in the labs and spun out. As Greg will tell you, he was a Berkeley student, spent a lot of time at SLAC doing research while he was there, so has a strong sort of dotted line to each of those institutions, even though it wasn't technology specifically licensed and spun out from there. There are examples of those in each case as well too. But so we've got a good community of emerging companies that are starting to come out of that. Now, as you heard this morning, there's an obvious connection to large end users, and we've gone from very small portable electronics now to electric vehicles and now to grid scale storage as parts of what that market are and that are being enabled. So large end users that exist here from the company point of view as well as the utility point of view. And I think another thing that people in California probably take for granted, but the government has been a very important part of stimulating that, and the biggest testament to that is the mandate for storage going into the grid now. So many other parts of the country, and we're seeing most of the innovation and policy starting to happen on the state level, given some of the challenges we face at the federal level, but many other states are nowhere near the impetus that California has. And so that really adds a lot of fuel to the fire and demand in terms of creating that opportunity to enable people to do that. And we couple that in with federal funding that's flowed into the area, as well as state funding which is supporting many of these projects as well. So you can see how these have all started to connect and evolve a little bit, but I think it looks a little bit like the picture Matt showed earlier of sort of these distributed microgrids, right? And wouldn't it be nice to actually really knit this all together and tie tie it into a highly leveraged ecosystem that we're trying to put in place. So there are connections, be they personal, be they institutional, that exist there, but you know, they're often sort of 2 or 3 party interactions there. Many of the people look for a very specific need and find the company that can do that, but may not realize the benefit that they can achieve from that. Another important example is that, you know, there are lots of other assets in the Bay Area in terms of semiconductor technology know-how, biomanufacturing know-how. Some of the analogies to the kinds of things like you know, water treatment plants is an analogy that Craig used, all exist, and the opportunity to leverage a lot of that knowledge from here as well. The real challenge, though, is we've seen that there's been a real transition for doing a lot of research here, but the manufacturing often takes place elsewhere. And so what's the opportunity to really knit together the ability to leverage this ecosystem and see what we can do to sustain some of that manufacturing value add and the quick feedback and learning that comes from that by locating that all here in California. We've seen clearly that by connecting some of these linkages, we're getting more value out of them than we have from just the individual one-on-one interactions. And CalCharge has done a number of those things over the past year that I'll talk about, and we see that as a big part of what the motivation is for participation and for people to plug into this growing network here. And it really is starting to make these connections. So we see CalCharge as facilitating a lot of interaction, facilitating a lot of you know, sort of rapid feedback and learning, consolidating sort of sets of requirements where there's common needs and common overlap that can be addressed more economically, collectively. And I'll give you some more examples of that specifically in the next couple of slides. We think of this as sort of 4 main program areas, and I'll walk through briefly each of these. In the top left is the technology acceleration, and that was, I think, really one of the impetus in terms of the founding myth for CalCharge. Venkat Srinivasan was a scientist at LBL, had actually gone out and taken a leave of absence and worked in industry for a while in a very small startup, and was asked, you know, how can we come back and leverage Berkeley Lab to help us, you know, answer some of the really key technology questions we had. Venkat's answer at the time was, you know, I'm not sure we work on the same timescales. It's really challenging, given some of the requirements that exist there, to be able to be nimble and responsive the way a small company or even a large company would need to be when faced with an important challenge that they're trying to address. And so the technology acceleration, what CalCharge has done here, has been able to put in place a master agreement with Berkeley and very soon with SLAC that will allow companies who are participants in that to come in and work very quickly. They've got an idea, they can be up and running in the laboratory in a very short order of time. What's something that can take from 6 months to a year and a half, sometimes to negotiate, usually over legal terms that have nothing to do with the technology, can now be streamlined because that agreement is already set in place, and it just falls under a specific task order related to talking about the technology. You can be up and running very quickly. And there are now at this point, you know, 3 or 4 companies that are starting to do work at Berkeley. We've got companies that are coming in to use some of the facilities at SLAC today through the normal access means, but this is only going to accelerate, and we see this as a really important attribute for the technology acceleration. On the professional development, one of the things that's important to sustain this ecosystem as it grows is people who have the right job skills to be able to come in and do that. And so an important legacy of this is, or an important aspect of this, is to develop the first master's in engineering in battery technology, which will be at San Jose State University. That course program has been under development and will launch this fall. And so there are probably people in here who are taking the classes and people who may want to take the classes there. And we'll also have a professional education component of that. But I think that's a really important part of the ecosystem. If I go to the right, there was a question that came up earlier during Matt's talk about fire protection, right? So we have, and I think this is something that I continue to learn more and appreciate more, is a strong relationship with IBEW NECA, which is related to being able to come in and install these systems, being able to, you know, hook up a high voltage charger in your home for your EV. There's lots of things that are important to train the workforce for the deployment part of that, as well as the technology piece of that. And that's a really essential piece to also making this run and run well. And then if I go up to the top right, the pre-commercialization support is an area where we've had a couple of different road mapping meetings held at both at LBL and at SLAC over the last few months. Craig, you and some of the folks from Primus came to the one at SLAC where we focused on flow batteries. We had one earlier that focused on sort of lithium-ion cells. And what's really interesting here is, you know, I've got experience in my career going back to, you know, the days of Semitech or Flat Panel Display Consortium, where there's a pre-competitive set of things that companies can do together in a very effective way. which is often what draws them together. But there's also a lot of value just from the conversations and the information sharing and the networking that gets created and built out of that kind of thing. So we see a real extensive value in being able to continue on that and then look for opportunities to provide shared resources, shared facilities, and common capability to leverage existing technology that we can pull in from some of these other areas. So that's an important part, and I think maybe one of the things that people see a lot of value collectively as opposed to the technology acceleration, which is often a one-on-one interaction and access to the lab resources. So we officially launched actually last month up in California at the Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative. Assistant Secretary Dave Danielson announced this as part of the summit meeting that was held up there. Maybe some of you were there as part of that. We actually filled a stage up with all the member companies who were present in the audience. So it was to the point where we were starting to get worried it might not sustain all the weight that we had there. But it was a great event, and I think it really shows as a testament what the recognition of the value that people are seeing coming from this. We have the partner members on the right as some of the labs and the institutions that are delivering the program, and we have general and charter members from that ecosystem of many companies around here, and we're continuing to talk and would like to continue to talk with you if you're interested in that membership. I'll actually point out Chris and Rachel, who are here from CalCharge, sitting over on the side of the audience, and they'd be happy to talk to you as well if you've got any questions about CalCharge. So that's all I've got to say, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct you to Chris or Rachel for any specific follow-up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for filling in at the last minute and speaking to someone else's slide deck. That's never easy, but you did a fantastic job, so thank you very much. You guys time for a few questions if anyone has any. One over here.
Yeah, I got to say, you made that look seamless. It seemed like it was your deck. I was just curious. I've heard some hints that there's something brewing in the Hunters Point area of San Francisco in regards to CalCharge. Am I mixing that up with something else that Greg Anderson might be working on? Jeff Anderson.
So the CalCharge is administered by California Clean Energy Foundation, CalCEF. There is a piece of CalCEF that is working with Hunters Point that is separate from CalCharge. Jeff is involved in both of those activities, and I'm only involved in CalCharge. So.
Any more questions?
That was an easy one to wave off.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. Sounds like you have great programs, for example, the technology acceleration and program development. But who actually is doing, helping your members, who actually is administrating, and where assuming the funding is from the membership and plus the foundation, is that correct?
Right. So let's talk about the technology partnership piece of that specifically. So there are parts of the national labs that operate as funded by the DOE, the user facilities, like coming to SLAC to use the synchrotron is something that's DOE funded and available for people to take advantage of. There are specific research programs that you may want to do, accessing testing equipment at LBL or accessing self-replication equipment at LBL. In those cases, as part of the cooperative research agreement, you'll define a scope of work, and those resources do need to be funded by the company doing the work at the facility. Company employees can come in and then, once they've been trained, essentially can work at the lab facilities to do that work directly. They can do that in partnership with support from lab staff as well. It sort of depends on what the project involves and what the capabilities are of the employees and the staff respectively in terms of meeting the goals of that project.
All right, I think we'll cut it off there and go on to the next speaker. But once again, thank you very much.
Thanks.